Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for what turned out to be the first episode of Vintage Books Live for the fall season. If anybody tuned in last week to hear Deborah Gwartney, I am so sorry. She and I got our wires crossed, and we ended up not being on the same page about when and where. So we are working to reschedule that because I'm really excited to talk to her, and we will do it. It'll just be a little bit later this season. But tonight we have Kerilynn Wilson. Kerilynn is the author of Faint of Heart, and we got to talk to her about that. It's a graphic novel, and we talked to her about that a few months ago. And then last week, I don't know what day it is anymore, but yes, this month, let's just say it that way. Her first picture book came out. It's called, oh shoot, now my mind went blank right when I was looking to announce it.
It's okay.
One Foggy Christmas Eve. And we've actually been talking about it since that last interview because she knew that it was coming when we talked last time. And so now it's finally here, and I'm very excited for her. It really is a really gorgeous book, and I'm super excited that we're going to share it. And I'm going to have her share a couple images from the book in a little bit. But first of all, let's start out. Can you just tell us a little bit about the story, about the premise of the story of the book?
Yeah. So One Foggy Christmas Eve is about a girl who every Christmas Eve they go to Nana and Papa's house and she has the perfect gift to give them, but she can't because their house is completely consumed by fog and they can't leave. And so through a series of adventures and creativity, she travels and takes her family and they manage to get to Nana and Papa's house. But
Yeah,
she loses her gift along the way, so she has to figure out what to do.
this is very important. Um, I am very curious what the inspiration for this book was because it's a very Christmassy book, but it's also just a very kind of, I mean, fog is not only in the Pacific Northwest, but it does feel like something that's, that's very place oriented too. It's just fun. It's just a fun idea. And so I'm curious
Yeah.
where the nugget for the idea started.
I think that it's kind of a fun book because it was a couple different nuggets of ideas that sort of melded together in the process. I think originally when I started out seriously pursuing this manuscript, it was just it was mostly about fog and it had
Mm.
something to do with fog and using creative ideas to navigate. Um, and then it merged slowly, that idea merged with um, this character that just really used her imagination. And so there's the creativity of dealing with the fog sort of merged with, oh, the way she sees the world is she's able to use that. Um, and so that sort of merged with the fog idea. And then the third idea it merged with was sort of the urgency that Christmas brought.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
I remember me and my agent were talking about this idea and dealing with the character was dealing with navigating through the fog, and it just felt like she she was dealing with distance and so like missing something, and that I grew up with traveling to see my grandparents, and the travel is sort of was like this instant connection.
Yeah.
And then Christmas, I don't know, it kind of just naturally fell into that and made
Yeah.
everything
Yeah.
click. So it was like a bunch of sort of nuggets of ideas that sort of all came together. I don't know if I explained myself very
Yeah.
well, but
No, I think that
it was a
that's a
long, sort of
really,
confusing process for me
yeah.
to do.
Well, I think that really that's more indicative of the creative process than some bolt out of the blue. And it's not that it never happens the bolt out of the blue, but I think more often it's I've got this piece and I also want to talk about this, or, if it's
Mhm.
a novel, maybe you have this piece and you have this piece and you have this piece and you just are sitting there puzzling about how to
Mhm.
fit them all together. And I think the same is true of picture books and middle
Mhm.
grade and whatever. It's just they take different forms, the pieces take
Yeah.
different forms. But yeah, I think one of the reasons that I love this book so much, not just because the illustrations are so amazing and the story is so lovely, but also just personally, like when my husband and I were first married, we would try to get home for Christmas, but we would spend Christmas Eve with his family, but
Yeah.
my family, and then we would try to get to my family's for Christmas, like that night, but they live like 3 hours apart.
Wow,
And
yeah.
we had some harrowing, foggy, wintry drives when we probably shouldn't have been driving. So,
You have
so there definitely
to.
was a personal connection too.
Yeah.
Um, Now I can't read my writing, so I'm gonna just be an old lady here. Okay, that's what it was. Um, I think that we talked about this a little bit when we talked about Faint of Heart, but I figure that not everybody will be the same person watching, or maybe we'll talk about it in a different angle than we did last time. But what is your process? I mean, you talked about a little bit about the ideas coming together.
Mhm.
When you are sitting down and thinking of ideas and characters and whatnot and kind of putting all the puzzle pieces together, does it end up being more visual for you at first, or more, or the words, snatches of words, or kind of both? How does it end up kind of being born?
Um, it's always a big mess, I feel like for me. It's definitely the visuals definitely usually come first. Um, but what I've realized my process looks like, and I think that my editor and my agent who I work with a lot with my ideas would tell you this too, that it's a lot of put everything in the bowl, put everything in the pot, all your visual ideas and maybe text and things in there, and then slowly you have to take like a bunch of stuff out.
Yeah.
Because I think I I get a bunch of ideas and then you have to trim it down and
Yeah.
pare it down. Yeah, I described it once. I started feeling. I thought, like you said, it would be like a bolt of genius, a bolt of lightning. I would get this idea, and it would all
Oh,
feel.
I wish that were true.
But it's more like there's a big block of marble and you're slowly
Yeah.
chipping
Yeah.
away at getting rid of all the extra stuff that you
Yeah.
don't necessarily have to throw away the extra. You could save it for another book, as
Yes, yeah.
as my agent has told me. So
That's
but
true.
yes,
Agents are good for that. They're like, don't get rid of that, just
yes,
save.
save
The
it,
other the
not
other
for this
metaphor
book.
I've used for people a lot is it's like putting clay on the table.
Yes.
So you got to go find all the clay and you throw
Mm-hmm.
it all on the table. It looks like a hideous mess. And then you're figuring out like what's gonna come out of that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but it's interesting that you bring up marble and I bring up clay. It's like I think for some people it probably is a more additive process, and for some people it's a more of a pulling
Yeah.
stuff away process, and it probably just depends a little bit on
Mm-hmm. I
how
think for
we
me, it's because
work. But yeah.
I get so excited. Because I love I feel like, I mean, everyone loves the beginning of creating, right? Because
Oh
when it's
yes,
all
it's the
bright and
best part.
shiny and new, then I get super
Your
excited and I want
first
to do all
crush and
sorts
you're
of
so
stuff.
excited.
Yes.
And then you gotta actually work on it. And it's like,
Yeah. Um, when I originally started with this book, I wanted it to be, or at least I originally pictured it as being wordless. But
Mm.
I think just as it went along, just text, like you said, it sort of fell into place, text. And my editor helped me with this too, that it just, the text really helped with the flow of it
Yeah.
all and
Yeah.
being able to process things because there's creatures coming out of the fog and things turning into things. And I think the text helped.
Can you read like the either the first page or the maybe the first two pages? Because isn't a ton of text, so maybe the first two spreads would be good.
Okay. Well, I love showing. So this is, I'll take the, I'll show this. I'll just show the first couple because I like
I know the end papers are so beautiful too. The whole thing is just so pretty.
this is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Fog all comes in. One foggy Christmas Eve. I have to get used to reading it. There we go.
It's sideways. There you go.
Okay. On Christmas Eve, we always go to Nana and Papa's house. Come on, Sammy. But this year, the weather is awful and my parents say we can't go. I'm sorry. Even though I made the perfect.
Hmm.
I
Yay.
won't let the fog keep us home. What will Nana and Papa do without us? Should I keep going? And then this is
Oh,
actually
yo,
red.
look at that. That's so good.
This is one of my favorite ones.
That's so cool. Can you also show the spread with the reindeer?
Yes. Okay. So they travel through the fog and then she gets lost. And then
Yay. Look how pretty they are. And I forgot to ask Kerilynn ahead of time, so I don't expect you to have this by you, but if you go to her Instagram account when she did her book launch, there was a friend reindeer,
yes,
a very giant one,
a very
which
large.
was amazing.
That was so much fun. I've always wanted to do like a really, I'm a crafty, like I like
Yeah.
not an engineer. So like the back of it is very duct taped and
That's okay. No one has
but
to
I
see
can
the back.
no one has to see it except now I've told everyone. But hot glue and duct tape.
Yeah.
I can do crafts, so I love it.
Yeah, it was very great. So have you taken that to more than one store, or just the one so far?
Just the one so far, but he's gonna make his way to Powell's and a couple other
Oh,
bookstores
awesome.
as far as I can. I think
That's
you guys are
fantastic.
only a little bit of ways from me too. We should talk.
Yeah. To where? Where did you say?
I don't think you're that far from me. Maybe I could make my way out there.
Oh, well, that would be fun. We could have pictures with the reindeer. Like pictures with Santa, except with the reindeer
Right?
instead. So I'm curious, that's a picture book debut, right? Okay,
Yes.
make sure I didn't miss
Oh yeah.
something there. But your first book was a graphic novel.
Yes.
What was that process like? How is that different for people who aren't familiar with how those two processes might be different? What was there anything about the picture book process that was still surprising, even though I'm sure you were familiar with most of it after having gone
Mhm.
through the
Um,
first publication?
I think not surprising so much as confirming that it is hard. It's still writing a book and it's still making it as, wonderful and precise and
Yeah.
as great a book as you possibly can. And on the one hand, because it's less pages, that part, like the grueling aspect of doing that many illustrations, wasn't there. So that was sort of it, that felt easier on the one sense because it was just less pages, but they were they still needed to have such impact that it didn't feel
Yeah.
any less. It didn't feel less,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. It
It
was
does make sense because I
so
think the picture book process is super intense because you
mhm,
have fewer pages to do what you need to do.
right,
So
right,
it's like you might have fewer pages, but you have to work like 50 times as hard on each spread because it has to
right,
be absolutely, you have to nail it every
right.
time. Yeah.
You want it to like convey the right emotion and action and meaning without being like overwhelming or too busy. Um, and yeah, it was so
Yeah.
that didn't surprise me on the one hand because I feel like I've heard that before. I had heard it before going into it. Oh, like you may think it's easy because it's shorter and it's not. And so I
Yeah. Yeah.
was expecting it to be difficult and it was.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Very
think
fun though.
that's the thing that I most tell people that are new is that like it scared me off. Like I thought I was gonna do picture books and I was like, holy freaking heck, this is really hard. I think sometimes writing 30,000 words is easier than than doing a picture book. And even when I was doing readers, like the lower the level of the reader was, the harder it
Mhm.
was because
Yeah.
you had fewer. Now,
Yeah.
that's not as true for picture books in that sense because you're not
Hmm.
like having vocabulary lists that are only 10 words
Right.
long or whatever.
No.
But it has to be so artful and so precise.
Hmm.
And that's
Yeah.
challenging.
I remember there was some, I can't remember which words exactly, but we were going back and forth through the text. And I remember there were some words where it was like, this might be some vocabulary that was too advanced. But
Yeah.
was a little concerned. I didn't want it to be too,
Yeah.
like, you want it to be interesting
Yeah.
vocabulary
Yeah.
for kids, but also you don't want them to not get it and sort of check out.
Yeah.
So, anyways, it was
Yeah.
yeah, it's a whole thing.
Well, and I think it's a particularly interesting challenge. Like I said, when I was working on readers, that's a whole different animal because the kid is reading the book. Picture
Yeah,
books, typically, they're not necessarily reading the book, so the words don't have to be as easy to read,
right,
but they have to be concepts that the
right.
kids will understand. And so like you get this crash course in child development that you
Mhm.
never thought you were going to get because you're like, well, what do you mean they can't understand that? Then you're like, well, this part of the brain doesn't come online until da da
Mhm.
da da da. And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. What's funny too is I was writing this before I started writing it, I think when I was pregnant with with my oldest daughter. And then, but my youngest now is almost 7 months old by the time it came out.
Yeah, yeah. That's the other nature of, well, books in general, but I think picture books in particular is that they can take a bit to
Yeah.
come out. But so with Faint of Heart, you have a graphic novel.
Hmm.
You've got a picture book now. Do you have like other genres that you think you might tackle? Will you probably stay in these two
Ooh,
or
that's a really good question. So that's a really good question. I have so I speaking of books that publishing takes a long time. I have a finished picture book that will come out next year.
yay?
Um, so I have another picture book, and then I am working on a second graphic novel, same age range, so YA graphic novel. But then after that, I haven't thought about switching
Yeah.
genres or that's a really good question. I have several ideas for picture books, and I have more ideas that I'm a little nervous about for graphic novels because right now I'm in the middle of like deep editing for
Yeah.
my second graphic novel. And so considering another one is like, oh, it feels
Yeah. Oh,
like a
yeah.
lot.
Well, we'll ask you that in the next interview.
Yeah. but I have them. But
Yeah, it's like
genres
I'm
is a
never
really good.
doing this again. What are you
Yeah,
talking about?
I feel like middle grade, like maybe. So I've done more. Yeah, I feel like middle grade might be a really fun something
Yeah,
to try. But I
yeah,
think that I would probably stick with graphic novels and picture, but like
yeah,
because I'm so comfortable in the
yeah.
illustration
The
heavy
visual end of it. Yeah,
medium. Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's been interesting for me to see like what's happening in the graphic novel space. When I started working at the bookstore 3 years ago, it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
something like I was aware of them, but I hadn't really read any.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's just an interesting space. And it's so,
Yeah.
still growing and everything. But I just think it's fascinating that I think this is changing. But I know when I first started working at the bookstore, I think there was still this sort of graphic novels aren't reading kind of
Mm-hmm.
mentality. They're just comic books or whatever. And
Right.
what I find really interesting about graphic novels is I actually find them harder to read.
Oh, really?
And I think for me, it's probably the ADHD. Like I open the
Mm-hmm.
page and there's just all of this sensory
Mm-hmm.
information on the page. And so I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I gotta like focus on one frame at a time and all that kind of stuff. Whereas a written page is just black and white.
Yes. Do you
Um,
find that you read the text first in a graphic novel, or do you look at the pictures first and then read?
that's a really good question. I probably take in pictures first
Okay.
and then settle in and read.
Yeah.
That's a really good question. I'd be really curious for the folks that are watching either now or if you're watching the replay. Like what's your experience of with graphic novels versus like a just a black and white text
Yeah.
printed page? Is it
I
easy? Which one's easier for you? Which one's harder for you? Because I this is like the informal thing that I'm curious about now from people of um I'm thrilled to see them get more respect because I think that they do take a different kind of decoding than
Mhm.
like just a printed page.
Mhm.
And it's not easier, I don't think. I
Mhm.
think it's just different.
Yeah.
So fun to see
Yeah.
people talking about it and see what they think. So yeah, put it in the comments. Do you find them harder to read than a novel, a regular like written word novel, or do you find it easier to process that information that
Mhm.
comes to you? So, but well, that's really cool. Are you allowed to share yet? The picture book that's come out, is that public information yet, or are
I
they
think
still?
so. I think so. Uh it's a monstrous bedtime, and I believe it's scheduled for summer of 2025.
All right.
But the other one, I don't even have a confirmed title, so I can't talk about that one
Yeah, no, that one
yet.
I just based on where you are in the process, I figured that one
Yeah, yeah.
wasn't out
But the
yet,
picture book, that one is,
but
yeah.
how are you finding, so Faint of Heart's been out for a while and
Mhm.
you're in the midst of um going around for the picture book. I'm
Mhm.
curious, I don't know that we on the show or with you have talked very much about the marketing end of things.
Mhm.
How you find that, how you find a space in your brain that's because I think most of us find that different and harder
Mhm.
than the actual the create the they're both creative processes, but it's a different kind of creative process. How
Yeah.
is that going for you, and like have you learned anything that you're taking forward as you've gone through this
That's a
process
good,
with Faint of Heart and now you're going through it with
yeah.
all your Christmas Eve?
That's a really good question. I don't know that many people where marketing is their favorite thing. I do know some. I do know some.
Yeah, there's a
But
few. There's some people that are really good at it. And I'm like,
yes,
how do
they're
you do that?
really good at it. They're so confident. I am not a very confident person. So, um, I like, but like I said, I love crafts. And so like coming up with the deer thing was just like, well, I like making stuff, so I could make a big
Yeah.
thing. Um, Marketing, gosh, it's hard. I think that the one thing I should have learned, but maybe haven't yet, is that you just need to be comfortable with the way things flow. Like it's not once the book you do your job and try to make it as the best book that you possibly can. And then you kind of have to release it and let it go.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that if you have the capabilities and the energy to like put as much as you possibly can behind marketing and behind the book and figure out how to do that, I mean that's awesome. And I'm doing, the things that I feel like I'm comfortable with and I'm trying to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think a lot of it is just releasing it and letting it go and having the readers just kind of make it their own and hopefully it
Yeah.
finds its way to the
Yeah.
right people.
Yeah.
And I say I should have learned that because I still, it goes out and you're like, oh, I hope it does okay. I hope that people
Yeah.
enjoy it and it's all those things. But yeah, so still learning to let it go.
Yeah. Well, I think part of that is because marketing kind of brings together the business side and kind of that's where the business and the creativity like get mashed up.
Mhm.
And like you don't want to worry about how well it does, but it's also what you do for a living, so you do worry
Yeah,
about how well it does. And
yeah.
I think that's really normal. But yeah, I think there is a certain amount of just letting go of that control and letting readers take it on and make it
Yeah.
their own, because at that point it doesn't fully belong to you anymore, whatever form of creativity or media it is,
Mhm.
becomes more than just yours. So
Yes.
have you had any reader interactions that you just have found really fun and special?
Well, my my own daughter, when I got the advanced copy, we read it a couple times, and for a little bit, it was one of her favorite books. She read it many times, and then she moved on, and it was great. But like, that's books. That's
Hey, that's
that's
awesome.
normal. It was your
Yeah.
favorite, and so, but that was just, I don't know. That was kind of, it was fun because it was, oh,
Yeah.
it's a book, and it's just part of regular life. Um, yeah, I had a friend's kid who he read the book too, and later I saw them later, and he had drawn a drawing for me that was from the book, and it was just really sweet. So
Yay.
that was really nice.
That is
But
really,
yeah, it's, I mean, it's only been, I guess it's officially a week.
yeah,
Um,
that's true
I
today.
haven't had that many
Yeah,
interactions
no.
yet.
Yeah,
Yeah, not yet.
you will. Is it a little weird to have a Christmas book come out in September, or does
Yes, it
that feel?
is.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny because when it came out, I'm like, I'm going to tell everybody about it. I love this book so much. It's so pretty and it's so good. And then you're like, but it's not Christmas yet. So,
Hey, I love Christmas so much. So like I'm okay with it, but I also I totally, it's very early to be
yeah,
super
well, and
excited
that's
about
actually
Christmas.
normal in the book world. We have a big fat section of Christmas books already because
Yeah.
it's time for them to start coming out, because people who are more organized than me are actually doing their Christmas shopping.
More organized
That's
than
not
me.
me.
I mean, I start making my Christmas cards like in August, but I'm really, it's, yeah, I still, getting gifts is hard. So
Yeah,
anyways,
yeah. What is one thing, I think, I'm just curious for you personally, what's one thing that you think picture books do really well that maybe other books can't because they're a different medium, they're a different form of storytelling?
I, not that novels can't do this, but similar to graphic novels, but particular to picture books, I love when the pictures and the words interact in ways where
Mm,
the pictures are telling
yeah,
one side of the story and the words are, they kind of let each
yeah,
other breathe. And so the kids are able to um, point out the things that they see. And maybe on a second read, they'll notice, oh, there's this happening in the background or something like that. One interaction I did have with a kid was um, they'd read the book a couple times and they were pointing out to their parents. Um, I guess I can't share. It's spoilers, but they were noticing something happening in the end of the book that the parent didn't even notice, and the kid noticed it happening in the illustrations, and they were pointing it out to the parent. And so I think that the way that the illustrations can tell a different side
yeah,
of the story, or even like things that aren't necessarily plot changing,
yeah,
it's like
yeah,
fun little asides.
yeah. Easter
Just
egg, as I think we
yeah,
call them today, but gold
yes,
bugs.
yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah,
goodness. My daughter, yeah, she knows where all the gold bugs are. It's the
yeah.
best.
No, it's funny. We are having so plug everybody. Aside, this isn't really part of the interview, but we are having a Richard Scarry celebration at the store next Saturday. We were given some fun stuff from the publisher, and we were just kind of like, well, let's just have a Richard Scarry Day to celebrate the end of summer. And so I put up advertising about it on the social media, and I basically said, nostalgia welcome, all ages. Like you can get your stickers, you don't have to be a kid. You can find Goldbug if you want to. You don't have to be a kid. And actually, it's really funny. You never know it's going to hit or miss, but this particular one has gotten more, interaction or whatever. And I do think that that element of being able to see things in the story or little things that are hidden or a character that reappears or
Mhm.
whatever is going on in the illustrations is like super memorable. I mean, you say Goldbug to pretty much anybody who was a kid between, the 70s and now, and they'll know what you're talking
You
about.
know, yeah.
So I just think it's neat that picture books can do that. Like,
Hmm.
and even with graphic novels, the graphic novels, that happens a little bit, but usually it's more like reading the stills of a movie scene in a
Hmm.
way, or a
Yeah.
play. You're seeing things play out and the pictures are informing that. Whereas picture book, it really is like a dance between the two.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It feels a little bit like, yeah, I guess more like a stage play where you're kind of watching everything happening all at once, and there's people moving things in the background.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love it.
Well, thank you so much. This has been really fun. I'm very excited. I hope you all will come out and check out the book in the store. It is really beautiful. I'm sure we're going to have it all through the Christmas season because it's going to be one of our favorites. Um, and we will be continuing with Vintage Books Live next week. I realized that I didn't do this on purpose, but it's going to be kind of fun. We have three picture book authors back to back to back.
Hey.
So we had Kerilynn this week, we have Belen Medina next week, and then we have Laurel Gale the week after that. So we're just going to be picture book festivizing for a few weeks on Vintage Books Live. So we hope you will join us or watch the replay. Thank you again, Kerilynn, so much for being
Thank
with us
you.
tonight, and
Thank you
good
for
luck with the
having
book.
me. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you, you too. Bye.